All right, we're now at chapter 13 of Why UFOs, Operation Trojan Horse, Johnny Keel. A sure cure for alligator bites. Chapter 13. Slag fell out of the sky over Darmstadt, Germany on June 7, 1846. According to Charles Fort, slag? Preposterous, of course. Why slag? Could no more fall out of the sky in Germany than it could over Puget Sound a century later. Fort detailed more than a dozen other slag fall cases from the 19th century, always carefully listing his sources. I have taken the trouble to check out several items from the work of Fort, and I found that he was painstakingly accurate. His books, all written in the first 3 decades of this century, that was last century. We now live in the 21st century. That would have been in the 20th century. His books all were written in the first 3 decades of this century. So that would be the 20th century. Recount case after case of strange aerial phenomena which are identical to our modern UFO sightings. So when the late Mr. Fort informed us that 1846 was a most unusual year, we are obliged to take him seriously. Indeed, 1846 was a most extraordinary year. It not only rained blood and frogs and slag, there were strange glowing objects circling those garbage-filled skies, and our naughty poltergeists were having a field day, particularly in France. Furniture was floating around a house in La Perrière, I don't know how to Perrière, France. Is that how you pronounce it? I don't know how you pronounce it. The rocks were being tossed in the house in La Perrière, France. Excuse me, at the house. Let me try this again. What the hell? Furniture was floating around a house in La Perrière, France. Rocks were being tossed in the home of M. Le Bible, the Rival, or Libel. Okay, Bible, Rival, La Rival. Miss La Rival in Paris. Dishes were dancing across the tables of Roulette, France, and in a field outside of the little town of La Salette, a miracle was taking place. 2 children, Melanie Calvet, 15, and Maximum Garud, I think this is pronounced Garud, 12, convinced skeptical adults that they had seen a religious vision, a great globe of light hovering above the fields. It opened, and they avowed a small bright light moved out. It was some kind of glowing entity who spake to them in French. The 2 youngsters, having been schooled in Catholicism, assumed that the entity was Our Lady. She gave them a series of prophecies accurately predicting the terrible potato famine which struck far off Ireland in the winter of 1846 through 47, and the failure of Europe's wheat crops in 1851. In fact, all kinds of droughts and diseases affected crops from 1846 to 1855 all over Europe, causing great suffering and starvation. She also allegedly stated, "Little children will be seized with trembling and will die in the arms of those who are holding them." This grim prophecy proved valid too when more than 75,000 people, mostly youngsters, died in an epidemic of ague, A-G-U-E, a malaria-like disease which produced fever and shivering and death. This was strong stuff in 1846, particularly since the children also reported that the lady warned, "If my people will not submit, I shall be forced to let the army of my son fall on them." But she added, "If sinners repent, the stone and rocks will turn into heaps of wheat, and potatoes will be sown by themselves." Since it is very unlikely that the two children could have invented these prophecies, we can assume that their story was true, and in fact, it appears to confirm to the now familiar tactics of the ultra-terrestrials. Their uncanny talents of precognition, the ability to foresee our future, once again serve to provide us with proof of contact. This tactic is still being used. The next year, in 1847, that spirit moved into a little house in Hydesville, New York, and in 1848, the redoubtable Fox sisters began to communicate with it. Spiritualism began in earnest, and by 1852 there were thousands of adherents in the United States alone. From 1848 to 1851 there was a worldwide UFO flap, and poltergeist cases hit an increasing peak in 1849. Strange, isn't it, that all these things should explode at once? The coming of the UFOs went unnoticed, but the poltergeist and hauntings created a sensation and gave an added impetus to the spiritualist movement. In France, a man named Alain Cardi, I guess I pronounce it, founded Revue Spirit in 1850, or Spirit, in 1856, and spiritualism became the rage of Paris. And then, on February 11th, 1858, a 14-year-old girl wandered into a French hillside and fell to her knees. Her eyes filled with a vision of a beautiful woman. The girl's name was Bernetta, I think, Salbirus. I'm bad with people's names, especially I struggle with English as it is. The hillside was a garbage dump outside of the town of Lourdes. I got that one right. The miracle of Bernadette is so well Bernadette, I guess it is, is so well known that we hardly need comment on it. A local skeptic, one Dr. Dazov, I guess, followed the girl on one of her pilgrimages and watched in amazement as she entered a trance-like state, lit a candle, and held her hand in the flame for 15 minutes without seeming to feel it or harm her skin. Then she scraped away at the ground and a spring suddenly bubbled forth. Word of Bernadette's visions spread across France, and although she was only one who could see the lady, those who accompanied her and watched her in trance experienced unquestionable miracles. Between March 5 and March 25 of 1858, a series of miraculous cures took place at the grotto near Lourdes. Paralytics threw aside their crutches, after drinking the water from the spring. The following year, in 1859, the UFOs were busy again. The year after that, there was another outbreak of poltergeist cases in France and Switzerland. Forgetting the worldwide situation for a moment, we can draw some interesting conclusions from these French cases. 2 miracles occurred in France within 12 years of each other. The incident in La Salette in 1846 was definitely ufological in nature. The events at Lourdes were more subtle and fit more into the possessed type of phenomena. God dang. All right. The I can't say the word. Damn MS. And people say, well, maybe you should just practice it before you read. It don't make a difference. I just got to do it. And I'm sorry if I can't read or speak, but I'm going to do it because. And one of the reasons I do this, by the way, it's not only to learn, but to deal with the consequences of MS. It's very difficult to speak at times. It's really difficult. I mean, words that I've read my whole life I can't freaking pronounce all of a sudden. It's really frustrating. It is extremely frustrating.
Simultaneous.
Why couldn't I say that? Because I got MS. And it just gets in the freaking way. Sometimes I gotta do it. The simultaneous outbreak of poltergeist manifestations in France throughout this period, together with all kinds of aerial and meteorological phenomena. See Fort's Book of the Damned for listings of these reports. Tends to confirm the thesis that all these things are interrelated. When and if French investigators burrow into the newspapers and journals of this period, they will undoubtedly uncover many other lost reports which will add to this evidence. The curative powers of UFO. On September 1st, 1865, hundreds of citizens in the Kosick district of Czechoslovakia complained to their commissaries about the glowing red and black spheres that were buzzing their towns and villages. A Reuters dispatch from Prague added that this was the most recent of a series of artifacts of unknown origin which have been seen in the Czechoslovakian skies in recent months. The Iron Curtain had sprung a leak, and U-2s from another world were pouring through. 2 days later, on September 3rd, 1965, 4 metallic blue plates swooped out of the sky over the town of Cusco and the southwest Peru. Hundreds of people, alerted by a radio newscast, went into the streets to stare at the strange formation. The objects entertained them for 2 hours, performing intricate maneuvers above the town. They made right-angle turns, hovered, and skittered about in a manner impossible for any known type of aircraft. When they finally got bored with their audience, they sped away at incredible speed. Others were seeing lights in the sky that same night and weren't quite so entertained by them as the citizens of Cusco. Officer Eugene Bertrand of Exeter, New Hampshire, on a routine patrol, came across a trembling woman driver who told him an elliptical red object had just pursued her car from Eppington to Exeter. He claimed her, but didn't. What? He calmed her, but didn't take the incident too seriously. After all, everyone knew that flying saucers were non-existent, the product of hysteria and hallucinations. A few hours later, Officer Bernard, oh God, how do I get Bernard out of that? Officer Bertrand was called upon to investigate the report of an 18-year-old Norman Mascarello, who had also seen something weird in the sky. Mascarello led him to a field near Exeter. They both saw a large, dark object marked by a straight row of pulsating red lights lift above some nearby trees. It bore down on them and passed within 100 feet of their position. Bertrand started to draw his gun, thought better of it, and radioed for help instead. Another officer arrived shortly afterward, and the three of them watched the object as it silently moved away at treetops level. This was the beginning of the now famous book, Incident at Exeter, which was carefully and thoroughly investigated by reporter John Fuller. Well, I could say that, John Fuller. Fuck me. That same night, 2 other police officers, more than 1,000 miles from Exeter, were also making an unexpected visit to the Twilight Zone. It was shortly before midnight, and Chief Deputy Sheriff William McCoy and Deputy Robert Goody, depending on how to pronounce it, were cruising along a highway in Brazoria County, Texas, south of Houston. Goody, who was driving, was complaining to his partner about a sore and swollen finger. Earlier in the evening, he helped his son move a pet alligator. The creature had nipped him on the left index finger. He had bandaged it, but now it was throbbing painfully, and he expressed fear that an infection was setting in. The 2 men were discussing the need to wake up a doctor at the end of their patrol and have the finger tended when they suddenly noticed a large purple glow in the west, moving horizontally across the nearby oil fields. At first, they thought it was just a light from the oil fields. Then it turned and began to move towards them. A great rectangular globe of purple light, about 50 feet in height. It was accompanied by a smaller blue light. The men said later Goody had his window rolled down and was waving his aching digit in the breeze. As the objects rushed towards their car, he said he felt a definite wave of heat on his arm and hand. Whatever the globes were, neither man felt inclined to stop and investigate. Goody jabbed his foot on the accelerator, and when they were some distance away, McCoy looked back and watched the light rise again upward, flare brilliantly, and go out altogether. The two admitted frightened men sped back to Damon, Texas, where their excitement subsided. Deputy Goody noticed that his finger was no longer swelling or bleeding. The pain was gone. He removed his band-aids and discovered that his wound was almost healed. Had he been cured by fright? Unlikely, said the doctors, or by the heat from the eerie something. The wire services had a lot of fun with that story. Alligator bite cured by flying saucer. But somebody somewhere took the two men seriously. Low-flying light planes, apparently unmarked, flew back and forth over the area of the sighting for the next 2 days. Shortly after the incident, two strangers turned up at the sheriff's office looking for Deputy Goody. They proceeded to describe in detail what the UFO looked like. Even before Goody had an opportunity to tell them, then they suggested that if he should encounter a similar machine in the future, he should cooperate with its occupants, and keep any conversations with them to himself. The identities of these two mysterious men have never been determined. There have been innumerable cases in which witnesses have felt heat radiating from low-flying, unidentified flying objects, and there are several heavy documented cases in which people have suffered burns from the objects, but the Texas incident was one of the rare ones in which a wound was apparently healed by such radiation. When this story first appeared, it seemed so absurd that most ufologists neglected it and concentrated on the almost trivial sightings in Exeter. However, we now know that the absurd cases are the most important, and that the endless aerial sightings are practically meaningless. A major miracle. Giant winged beings, usually described as headless, are an integral part of the UFO phenomena. On September 18, 1877, the year that marked the beginning of Jessup's incredible decade, a winged human form was seen cruising casually across the sky in Brooklyn. In 1922, there were two cases in Nebraska of 8-foot-tall winged creatures disembarking from circular flying machines and soaring away under their own power. Headless winged creatures were reported over Scandinavia in 1946, And on November 16, 1963, 4 teenagers in Kent, England claimed that they had witnessed the landing of a spherical globe of light while returning home from a dance. A giant headless figure with bat-like wings waddled from it and terrified them, they said. A decade earlier, a 6 to 7 foot tall man with wings reportedly appeared in Houston, Texas. UFOs were also seen at that time. Starting November 1966 and continuing throughout 67, more than 100 people in Point Pleasant, West Virginia, insisted that they, too, had encountered a giant winged creature with blazing red eyes set deep in its shoulders. Most of these sightings took place around TNT area, a World War II ammunition dump. I have interviewed many of these witnesses and am convinced that they did see something. Perhaps that something is the basis for many of our legends of angels and demons, and perhaps it was that the same something that was flying around Portugal in 1915. There was a worldwide UFO flap from 1909 to 1914, encompassing Africa, Australia, Oklahoma, and other places. The poltergeist reports hit a peak in 1910 and 1913 and concentrated largely in France and Italy, although there was some activity in Portland, Oregon during the period. We are concerned here with the headless winged beings. However, the flap of 1909 through 1914 may have merely been a prelude to World War I and the astonishing events which followed, or it may not have been connected with those events in any way. We have no way of knowing, unfortunately, until more adequate research is done. We have to record much of this evidence as purely circumstantial. But in 1915, 4 girls were attending sheep at Quebeco, Portugal. Did I pronounce it right? Quebeco, Portugal? And I'm sure I didn't pronounce that right at all. When they allegedly saw a white figure hovering in the air. It looked like somebody wrapped in a sheet. There were no eyes and hands on it. The young girls reported to their family. None of the witnesses of the West Virginia winged creature had reported seeing hands or arms on it. These 4 children are supposed to have seen this white headless entity twice again that summer. One of the girls was named Lucia Abora. She was born on March 22nd in 1907, and she was to become one of the central figures in the earth-shaking drama to follow. In the summer of 1916, this same Lucia Abora was playing near a cave with some friends, and when they saw a light flying just above the nearby trees and moving slowly in their direction, as it drew closer, it became clear that it was a human figure. Later, the children described it as a transparent young man of about 14 to 15 of age. He settled in front of them near the cave and announced, "Don't be afraid, I am the angel of peace. Pray with me." The children knelt beside this transparent young man who glowed as brilliantly as crystal and prayed until he dissolved into nothingness. A few weeks later, the angel appeared again before this same group in the same place, and again they prayed together. The initial contact was made. The stage was set. Europe was in flames, and soldiers in the trenches were seeing strange omens in the sky. Blood was spilling needlessly, and the most mismanaged war in history. Generals on both sides ordered suicidal attacks, which cost thousands of lives without gaining an inch of ground, and men were learning to take to the air, carrying the carnage with them. At first, pilots shot at one another while with pistols and rifles, but later machine guns were brought into play. Spiritualism flourished as the relatives of the dead and the long-sought communication with their sons and husbands. Thousands of women woke up screaming in the middle of the night, always at the precise time that their men fell on the distant battlefields. This same phenomena had shored up faith in spiritualism during the Civil War. It was to be repeated during World War II and the Korean War. It happened still as young men hurled headlong into pools of their own blood in Vietnam. On April 6, 1917, the United States formally entered the Great War. One month later, on May 13th, a Sunday, Lucia Abora, 10, Francisco Marto, 9, Jacinto Marto, 7, were in the meadows of a place called Cova da Ira, outside Fatima, Portugal, when they saw a flash of light in the clear sky. Thinking that it was lightning, he ran for shelter under an oak tree. There he goes in a tree. Oak trees are always connected to this shit. And when they reached it, they stopped in amazement, for there, hovering just about 3 feet high, hovering just above a 3-foot high evergreen nearby, a brilliant globe of light hung suspended. Within this globe there was an entity garbed in a luminous white robe with a face of light which dazzled and hurt the eyes. "Don't be afraid, I won't hurt you," the entity said, gently, in a low musical voice. The awed children asked her, it was a feminine voice, where she came from. "I am from heaven," she reportedly replied. "I come to ask you to come here for 6 months in succession on the 13th day at the same hour. Then I will tell you who I am and what I want. And afterward I will return here a seventh time." She asked them to say the rosary every day and pray for peace. Then the globe silently rose and floated away. It is noteworthy that only Lucia and Jacinto claimed to hear the voice. Francisco saw the object but heard nothing. The excited trio rushed home and tried to tell their families about their vision, but the adults refused to take them seriously. Word spread, however, and on June 13th, a small crowd of devout pilgrims followed the children to the Cova da Ira and watched from a distance. One of the witnesses, a woman named Maria Carrera, I guess is pronounced it, testified that she saw nothing when the children suddenly knelt and began talking as an unseen entity. talking to an unseen entity, but she did hear a peculiar sound, like the buzzing of a bee. Lucia later said that the lady asked them to learn to read. I wish I could learn how to read. Shit, I'm 55 and I still can't fucking read. I know one thing. This life here, this run has been brutal. Fuck. A big thing to ask a simple peasant in 1917, Portugal. On July 13th, a much larger crowd gathered as the three children knelt and addressed an entity whom only they could see. Tamerto, one of the adults, reported that he heard a sound like a horsefly and an empty water pot. Hopeful cripples and blind men urged the children to ask for a miracle. Lucia relayed the request and said that the lady answered, "Continue to come here every month. In October I will tell you who I am and what I wish, and will perform a miracle that everyone will have to believe." When you shall see a night illuminated by an unknown light, the lady continued, know that it is a great sign that God gives you, that He is going to punish the world for its crimes. That to prevent this, I come to ask the consecration of Russia. If they listen to my requests, Russia will be covered and there will be peace. Naturally, these small and simple children knew nothing of Russia. The Russian Revolution began on March 18, 1917, and could not have regarded it as any kind of threat. And it says here, an asterisk, be like Buzz is frequently said to accompany low-flying UFOs. It was at this July contact that the children were allegedly given a secret which has never been formally revealed. When the adults pressed her for details, Lucia would only say that this secret was good for some, for others bad. The visions of Fatima were now the sensation in Portugal. In August, the children were seized and imprisoned by the minister of Kuram, who threatened them and tried to make them confess that it was all a hoax, but the children stuck to their story even when threatened with death. The three youngsters were still being detained in Kuram when August 13th rolled around, but a crowd of 6,000 gathered at the Kova, and according to their testimony, a flash of light appeared in the sky, and then something resembling a small transparent cloud slowly floated down to rest briefly on the top of the evergreen tree. At the same moment, all the faces in the crowd were bathed in a multicolored light. Lucia, Francisco, and Jacinto were freed and returned to the meadow on August 19th. They reportedly saw and spoke with the lady again on that day. 30 days later on September 13th, the roads around Fatima were teeming with pilgrims, priests, nuns, and poor people and the rich. As is usual in events like this, most of these people came to beg for favors from the lady. They wanted their ailments healed and their troubles rightened. They mobbed the poor youngsters and pleaded for miracles, even though the promised miracle of October was common knowledge. the children could only repeat that earlier promise. Among the crowds in the field that day was Reverend Dr. Manuel Nuns Formigio. So Manuel Nuns Formigio. I don't know if I pronounced it right. Canon of the cathedral at Lisbon. I spent a lot of time in Lisbon. I used to be married to a gal that grew up in Almada, the twin city across the river from Lisbon. Anyways, and I still can't speak any fucking Portuguese after all this time. Anyways, the professor at the seminary of Santarém, who he later wrote that he noticed a peculiar dimming of the sun in the cloudless sky as the children went into their trance, but he failed to see the luminous globe reported by other witnesses. Up until this time, the lady had not identified herself in any manner. She had been seen only by the three children, and her voice had been heard by just Lucia and Jacinto. And determined adults had extracted and embellished a description of the lady from the youngsters, but they never really saw anything beyond a luminous figure. No hair or features were apparently visible. An estimated 70,000 people collected at Cova da Ira on October 13, 1917, in anticipation of the promised miracle. Many of them carried cameras and primitive hand-cranked movie cameras that had been set up by newsreel men. The weather was sore, with dark and sullen skies and heavy rain. The meadows and fields were a sea of mud, and the faithful huddled under umbrellas. The three children gathered with their parents in front of the little tree and waited. Shortly after noon, Lucia gasped, and her upright face flushed as she entered a rapturous trance. The lady had arrived. Even though the crowd saw nothing, the children declared that she held an infant in her arms, and for the first time she identified herself, saying that she was the Lady of the Rosary. The war was going to end soon, she told them, and all of the soldiers would be returning home. The war continued for another year. Suddenly, the crowd screamed, and all the people fell to their knees. Something was coming through the clouds, a huge silver disc, which rotated rapidly as it descended towards the mob. Fragile strands of silver angel hair showered from the sky, melting away before any of it could be collected. The object bobbed up and down, waltzing under the cloud layer. As it whirled faster, it seemed to change color, going through the whole spectrum. It swooped down and passed low over the terrified people. Then it bobbed upward again. These gyrations were continued for a full 10 minutes. Miles from Fatima, others were watching the same object. A well-known poet named Alfonso Lopez, Vieira, claimed that he saw in front his home in San Porto de Mol, 40 kilometers from Fatima, 18 kilometers away in Alberta, Donna de Fina Pereira Lopez, a teacher, and all her students reportedly witnessed the spectacle. Father Incio Lorenzo described it as looking like a globe of snow revolving on itself. Professor Almeida Garat, a distinguished scientist from Coimbra University, was in the crowd at Fatna and reported it was raining hard, and suddenly the sun shone through the dense cloud which covered it. Everybody looked in its direction. It looked like a disc of a very definite contour. It was not dazzling. I don't think it could be compared to a dull silver disc, as someone said later at Fatima. No, it rather possessed a clear, changing brightness which one could compare to a pearl. It looked like a polished wheel. This is not poetry. My eyes have seen it. This clear-shaped disc suddenly began turning. It rotated while with increasing speed. Suddenly, the crowd began crying with anguish. The sun, revolving all the time, began falling towards the earth, now reddish and bloody, threatening to crush everyone under its fiery weight. A wave of heat swept over the crowd, drying their rain-soaked clothes instantly. We might speculate that the same wave of heat may have affected the miraculous healings that reportedly took place among some of the sick people in the crowd, just as the heat from the purple globe in Texas seemed to heal Officer Goody's infected finger. Here we had an event of major importance with 70,000 witnesses, many of them priests, scientists, and journalists. It came at a time when Europe was shuddering with the violence of the First World War, and religious faith was being strained by the innately maybe it's supposed to say insanity of sudden death, or inanity. I think it's supposed to be S or insanity of sudden death. We would say it's insanity. Is there a word called that? Let's just find out. I never even seen that word before. Guess I need to start reading more myself, just for that reason alone. It is a nonsensical remark or action, a lack of sense or meaning.
Inanity.
Inanity. I never heard that word before. Inanity. Or a senseless remark or action. Well, maybe I produced a lot of that inanity and I haven't even realized it. Anyways, so, okay, and the religious faith was being strained by the inanity of sudden death, and it makes more sense, okay. It would become one of the most thoroughly investigated UFO-type incidents for the period. Innumerable books were written about it, yet none of these books contained photos of actual objects. There were plenty of pictures of the crowds, many of whom were pointing cameras skyward. But what happened to all the pictures they must have taken? What happened to all the movie footage? I have tried to locate some of these photos without success. I can only assume that they were collected by somebody and locked away in some secret archive. Since there was no U.S. Air Force and no CIA to blame, this one who did confiscate those pictures, and the initial reports of the phenomena, all of the witnesses agreed that the object was white and seemingly metallic, and that it changed color as the speed of rotation increased. Later, myths and mysticism replaced fact. The world assured the press that the sun remained in its usual place during the miracle. As the years passed, the miracle of the sun was gradually played down, and emphasis was shifted to the saintliness of the three children. The silver angel hair was now described as rose petals in most current literature. And then there's the fellows, Marcini, whatever the hell is it? I mean, it's one dude. Why can't I not think of his name now? I know why, because my MS is raging today. Fuck. It really is raging bad today. L.A. Marzulli, he claims in his work on Fatima that he found photos of the object that appeared that day. Well, that's questionable that it was that day or not. But they did find some photos of some kind of orb-like thing coming out of the tree. I think there might even be a video of it. I don't know. I know I struggled like a bitch in this one. Fuck. Alright, let's get back into this. I'll tell you one thing. My MS, multiple sclerosis, is raging today. Not that I'm expecting any sympathy, but man, screwing up big time. And everything today. Not just reading, so. But one of the things that symptoms of MS is speech. So. Analysis of the miracle. And I believe, if I haven't fucked that up, sorry about my language, but my frustration is real. We're still in a sure cure for alligator bites. Chapter 13. Alright, Fatima was not an accidental contact. It was obviously a carefully planned and deliberately executed demonstration. Dr. Jacques Vallée, Antonio Ribera, and other well-known UFO researchers have written extensively about it. But following the style of contemporary UFO research, they concentrated on the descriptions of the object and the fact that 70,000 witnesses were present, and they studiously ignored the whole pattern of events which preceded the appearance of the object. Those events were far more important than the climatic sighting. The correlations are very clear. First, Lucia was singled out in 1915 for the cautious initial contact. She saw something in the sky that summer, and a few weeks later, she and her friends were approached by a luminous, transparent figure, which appeared to be a 15-year-old boy. Since the child came from strict Catholic backgrounds. Did I say child? Since the children came from the strict Catholic backgrounds, the contact was conducted on a religious level. The boy asked the children to join him in prayer. Fear was replaced by reverence and awe. The experience undoubtedly amplified Lucia's religious beliefs and increased her interest in religious training. A study of her autobiography and the thorough reports written during and after the miracle suggest that she had many of the medium characteristics mentioned earlier, and that she willingly prepared her mind for the events of 1917. In modern contactee reports, we find that initial contact is sometimes carried out months or even years before the contactee is finally involved in the situation. Small children often have a high degree of ESP, but as they grow older and develop reason and skepticism, their minds become more disciplined to the material world around them. These powers seem to slip away. A remarkable Italian teacher, Maria Montessori, maybe that's what it is. So Maria Montessori worked out educational methods which took advantage of this fact, and she found the school system which bears her name. 4 and 5-year-olds in Montessori schools learn to read, write, and work out complicated mathematical problems by themselves. The teacher serves more as a consultant and does no lecturing or open teaching. Well, that's a good idea. And of course, I knew that from the past, but I think my sister did it for a little bit as well as a Montessori teacher. There are now Montessori schools worldwide, and many of her methods have been absorbed into our conventional educational system. My eyes are not working well today either. It is probable that small children make excellent contactee material because of these factors, and that may explain why so much UFO, ghost, and poltergeist activities seem to surround children. The world was in ferment in 1917, and the ultra-terrestrials may have decided that some form of impressive demonstration was necessary to restore faltering human values. Random appearances of signs in the sky could not accomplish this, nor would a repetition of the miracle of La Salette achieve this. The world was more sophisticated in 1917 than it had been in 1858. The ultra-terrestrials could see our future, and they wanted somehow to guide us and to help us try to correct our course. It must have been extremely important to them for them to make such an effort. They therefore selected 3 small children in Portugal and launched their careful plan. The events had to be staged so that they would support one another. Valid prophecies had to be made so that the prophecies dealing with the more distant future would be taken seriously. And the whole situation had to fit into the context of the UFO incidents, which were still to come. I don't know about this, bro. In May of 1917, the first contact was made in the usual UFO manner. A globe of light appeared and a faceless entity spoke to the children, probably through ESP and the trance state. Little Francisco could see the entity but could not hear it. Lucia had already been prepared through her earlier encounters, so she served as a catalyst. In that first meeting, the entity spoke of religious matters in a way that the children could understand and promised to return on the 13th of each month for the next 6 months. And of course, 13, we have the 12 apostles, and then number 13 represents Jesus, just like 33 does. When the children excitedly reported, because of course Jesus supposedly died when he was 33, right? When the children excitedly reported this to adults in their village, some of the more devout were impressed with their obvious sincerity, and the stage was set for succeeding contacts. Adults who accompanied them to the field in the months that followed heard sounds and saw aerial lights and were convinced by the trance which the children entered into. They spread the word and repeated the lady's prophecies. During one of the early contacts, she promised a big miracle on October 13th. Had this failed to materialize, the whole Fatima thing would have collapsed. But since it did occur precisely as the children said it would months before, we are obliged to take all their stories seriously. Many of the lady's statements and prayers, as related by the children, were phrased in a perfect Catholic dogma, a fact which impressed the attending priest. Since it was very unlikely that the children could have known enough about theology to make such things up, but all of these things were probably superficial trappings, quite similar to the endless descriptions of life on other planets given to UFO contactees. The only important things in the statements were the basic prophecies themselves. Skepticism being what it is, the ultra-terrestrials realized that the only way to win attention to these prophecies was to stage a careful demonstration which would be practically irrefutable and which would convince the church, the world, that the children had been speaking the truth. Thus the miracle of Fatima came about. Among the minor prophecies was the prediction that Jacinto and Francisco would soon die. They were delighted with this in their childlike way because it meant they were going to heaven. Lucia entered a convent and became a nun, was renamed Maria of the Sorrows, and was hidden away from the world for many years. The major prophecies of Fatima had been written down, sealed in an envelope, and turned over to the Vatican. They were supposed to be revealed to the world in 1960, but Pope John the 23rd decided it was advisable to preserve the mystery, according to Alfredo Cardinal Ottaviani, head of the Vatican's Sacred Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith. And Pope John took the secret with him into his grave. Now, The Congregation of Doctrine of Faith is the Vatican's propaganda apparatus. And they do a lot of spinning of tales and lies. Or did he? All kinds of rumors have leaked from the Vatican about that secret. It is said to be a prediction of the end of the world. And if you read the Bible properly, you realize that the end of the world was talking about the world of Jerusalem and the Jews in 70 AD, and that's exactly what happened. There hasn't been a temple since. Fatima was a modern event, yet but they keep using this end of the world trope, narrative, to mind screw generation after generation, because without that end of the world prophecy, and by the way, all three Abraham faiths need it, whether it's Jewish, Christian, or Muslim, and because most people would have been long, if these religions wouldn't be around today without it. Without brute force and the lies, they wouldn't exist, because they have nothing outside of it. I'm not saying there's any other better religions out there. I'm just saying that's how it works with the Abrahamic religions. The spell casting. Fatima was a modern event, yet it is already clouded with the distortions of belief. The photographs of the object have disappeared, and supposedly then L.A. Marzulli said he found some of them in his book. The key prophecy, by the way, L.A. Marzulli is one of these futurist, end of the world people who doesn't know his Bible, and I wouldn't trust anything he says when it comes out of the Bible. I'm not saying he's doing some good work, but you got to be able to read between the lines, you know. The key prophecy has been suppressed. Lucia shut herself away from the world. As the years passed, the object was turned into a dancing sun. The angel hair became rose petals, and the entire phenomena was removed from the field of science and entrusted to the religious. The carefully planned and deliberately executed demonstration of Fatima was therefore a failure so far as the ultra-terrestrials were concerned. Such demonstrations had proved highly effective in biblical times, but times were changing and new methods were called for. Mankind was getting scientific, so perhaps the phenomena should be altered to a seemingly scientific framework. A scientific, i.e. seemingly interplanetary series of demonstrations might capture the imaginations of those who had abandoned religion. There have been many modern miracles of the Fatima type, but they rarely gain much attention outside of religious circles. The flying saucers get much more publicity than the miracles. Other miracles and other correlations. Between the years 1937 and 1945, the entity who identified herself as the Queen of the Universe appeared more than 100 times to 4 young girls in the tiny hamlet of Heed, Germany, if that's how to pronounce it. Or Heeden? Yeah, I guess that's what it is. The girls aged 12 through 14 were Anna Schultz, Greta, and Maria Gensforth. And Susanna Burns. These visions began in November of 1937 and continued throughout the war, with the lady urging the world to pray much, especially for the conversion of the sinners, end quote. Hitler was probably not too happy about all this, especially since he openly considered himself to be an antichrist. There are all kinds of stories and rumors that Hitler was a trance medium himself and was in contact with evil entities who advised him and directed many of his genocidal policies. I don't know about that one. Not that I like the guy, but when you realize how many of these wars are staged deliberately, and they're actually wars against us, we the people, the general people, the peasants. Yeah. I got a feeling a lot of this that's bullshit too. Lesser miracles have included weeping statues and pictures which seem to fit into the poltergeist category. A plaster virgin began crying real tears in Syracuse, Sicily, in August 29, 1953, and continued to weep until September 1st. Investigators could find no rational cause of the phenomena. In other cases, pictures and statues have shed human blood. On Sunday, June 18, 1961, 4 young girls were playing marbles outside of the little village of Garabandal, Spain, when they suddenly saw an angel. And the girls, Mary Cruz Gonzalez, 11, Cochita Gonzalez, 12, Jacinta Gonzalez, 12, and Maria Loli Mason, 12. None of the Gonzalez girls were directly related. Said that he appeared to be about 9 years old, was dressed in a long seamless blue robe, had a small face with black eyes, of course, and fine hands and short fingers. For some reason, he gave the impression of being very strong. This figure was surrounded by a dazzling glow and faded into thin air without saying a word. The excited youngsters ran into the village and told everyone that they had seen an angel. Fatima was about to be repeated all over again. Most of the adults scoffed, but those whose faith was extreme listened and spread the word. An angel had visited Garabala, and a village in the heart of the Cantabrian Mountains in northern Spain, elevation about 2,000 feet. It's about 150 miles from Lourdes, France. 2 days after, the same 4 children were walking along a path outside the town when suddenly a brilliant white light exploded in front of them, terrifying them and blinding them briefly. Brilliant flashes of light from an unknown source are frequently reported by the contactees and UFO witnesses. There was an epidemic of such flashes in the spring of 1968. Often people reported that these flashes suddenly occurred directly in front of their moving automobiles. Others said that the flashes, like a flash gun going off, burst near them as they stepped outside of their homes. These flashes do not seem to be related to the mystery photographer, who frequently turned up and photoed the homes of witnesses. Soon after these initial experiences, the girls began to go into trances. termed a state of ecstasy by the religious, during which they would see the lady. Sometimes these trances would last for hours, and the girls would remain fixed in an awkward kneeling position with their heads thrown back and eyes staring at the vision, totally oblivious of the hundreds of people swarming around them. One of their first visits with the lady is a very special interest here. Shortly before 6 p.m. on Sunday, on July the 2nd, 1961, the children trooped the children trooped to their now sacred spot outside of Garabandal and immediately entered the trance-like state. They were later able to describe in detail what they had seen. These descriptions were dutifully recorded in the religious literature, later published by church affiliate groups. The lady was accompanied by 2 angels on this occasion. The angels were dressed like, quote, as if they were twins, end quote. The lady had long, thin hair, a long angular face with a fine nose, lips which were a bit thin. She seemed to be rather tall. Her hair was a deep nut brown, parted in the center. This is, of course, an almost classic description of the long finger UFO entities described by many contactees. Even more startling, on the lady's right, the girl said they could see a square of red fire framing a triangle that with an eye and some writing. The lettering was an old Oriental script. Did I say angle or angel? Did I mean to say triangle? It was triangle, okay. The angel in all of these cases sound suspiciously like our celebrated little men. The lady who has been so glorified by the religious may merely be a variation of Aura Rans. Conchita and the other children of Garabandal have now experienced more than 1,000 visions, and they have been frequently photographed during their ecstasies. A number of times, all 4 children have awakened simultaneously in their 4 separate homes and gone dashing into the night to the sacred place as if they were all somehow called by an unseen force. They have been examined by doctors, high government and church officials, parapsychologists, psychiatrists, by everyone except ufologists. I know of only one ufologist who had ever even heard of this case. The many messages conveyed by the lady have conformed precisely to Catholic dogma, using phrases and references which are significant to trained theologians but would be meaningless to children. The message of October 18, 1961, as dictated by the children, read, "We must make many sacrifices, do much penance. We must visit the Blessed Sacrament frequently, but first we must be good. Unless we do this, a punishment will befall us." A cup is already filling. The cup is already filling, and unless we change, a very great punishment will befall us. October 18, 1961, fell on a Wednesday. On Friday, June 18th, 1965, Conchito entered a trance and was purportedly given the following statement by the lady. As my message of the 18th of October has not been complied with, and it has not been made known to the world, I am telling you that this is the last one. Previously, the cup was filling, now it is brimming over. You are now being given a last warning. There was a wealth of evidence and testimony which leaves little doubt that these children of Garabandal were being possessed by some outside influence and were undergoing a supernormal experience. The messages of Garabandal followed the pattern of all the others received by UFO contactees and religious visionaries alike. Stern warnings that the activities of the human race displease the ultra-terrestrials. The religious messages, ambiguous, threaten worldwide punishment, while the UFO messages are more specific, i.e., stop meddling with atom bombs, or we will paralyze your whole world. Can we really afford to ignore these warnings? The nation of the third eye. There is no reason to think that the four children in Garabandal had ever seen or even knew about the eye symbol of the Great Seal of the United States. Well, this is not true, because throughout all these Jesuit cathedrals and Roman Catholic cathedrals throughout Europe, they do have that eye symbol in the triangle. So it represents God, right? All-seeing God, right? The power of the church, the power of God. Anyways, he's a little off. He's a little wrong on that one. Nor is it remotely possible that the children or any of the elders of Garabandal could have known of the importance that this symbol plays in the silent contactee situation. In fact, very few ufologists are aware of it. Now, this was written 50 years ago. Not in the day of internet where you can find, and or at least you used to be able to, until they started really censoring the shit out of Google. But I mean, I know like 7 years ago, it was really easy to find a whole bunch of cathedrals with the all-seeing eye on it, that eye within the triangle. I haven't looked and bothered to look in recent years, so it doesn't really matter to me anymore. But when I was a hardcore Calvinist, Protestant, exposing the Roman Catholic Church, I found them all over the place, and the Jesuits, you know what I mean? And then I found out that we were just no better, you know what I mean? The Protestants and the Calvinists, and nobody was, and they were being dishonest with the scriptures themselves. So it's amazing what that book does. Anyways. It makes you more dishonest. You start out improving in some things, some areas, morally, but you end up just focusing on the evil of other people and not even being honest about what the book says or who you are. So, anyways, those mysterious men in black who traveled around in unlicensed Cadillacs have reportedly been seen wearing lapel pins bearing the symbol. Well, that would mean Roman Catholic priests, some Roman Catholic order. they have also identified themselves directly with it as being from the nation of the third eye. Well, this also can't just say it's Roman Catholics, because a lot of other cultures, they have the eye symbol in their hand, that one as well. So it's not uniquely Roman Catholic. So they just adapted it putting it in the triangle with the sunburst around it. You know what I mean? But I don't even know if that is original late Roman Catholic. So, because you could find that throughout the world as well. So, of course, the third eye and the eye in the triangle. The triangle has three sides, right? So, shit. So we call the symbol third eye. Also doesn't sound directly as being from the nation of the third eye, so we call the symbol third eye. It would be interesting to find out why some cultures regard it as evil while others use it to symbolize deity. Why would a third eye appear beside the vision at Garabandal? Well, it's pretty easy, because there are a lot of churches and cathedrals with that in Spain, with that symbol in it. Was a symbol of identification, or was it a warning? The Vatican has been most cautious in the handling of the Garabandal case. The children have promised that a major miracle will take place there sometime in the near future. This miracle is supposed to occur above a grove of piffy, or I can't read it. There's like a thing in front of it. Oh, pine. There's a thing on the pine trees near the sacred place. It is said that it will somehow leave a permanent mark in the sky, a mark that will endure for the ages. In the meantime, there have been other miracles around the world. Most of them are greeted by silence from the Vatican. Two occurred within a few days of each other towards the end of March 1968, the year I was born. One was in the Philippines, and the other took place half a world away in Cairo, Egypt. 8 young girls on the island of Cambra in the Philippines began to suffer visions in the early part of the year, and the feminine voice of the Virgin promised a miracle. During the last week of March, April, 3,000 people poured onto the island and waited, some including a university professor, a prominent obstetrician, and an army major, reported seeing a circular object over the island. It whirled and changed through all the colors of the spectrum. They said others claimed that a brilliant glowing cross hovered over the island chapel. And then asterisk here, it says there were several sightings of glowing cross-shaped objects over England in the summer and fall of 1967. And I have filmed some stuff too in the sky and around that look like crosses or X's or pluses, that kind of thing. So a luminous female figure appeared on a roof of the Church of the Virgin in Zetown district in Cairo, and in the wee hours of Tuesday morning of April 1968. This one was a very famous one that always should be very famous. Thousands of people quickly gathered to view this entity. She was allegedly returned several times since, and returned several times since, and has been seen by many clergymen of the Coptic Orthodox Church, including Bishop Athanasius of Beni Suf, I guess that's wrong. The cops have even issued a formal declaration declaring their appearance of these miracles, or their acceptance of these miracles. Is the news of these miracles being suppressed? Hardly. Newsweek reviewed the Philippine case on April 8, 1968, and the New York Times carried a dispatch from Cairo on the event there in its issue in May 5th of 1968. 6 young Canadian girls ranging from 7 to 13 years old allegedly saw the Virgin Mary on the evening of Monday, July 22nd, 1968. And they reported that a luminous entity appeared before them, hovering in the sky near St. Bruno, Quebec. St. Bruno, Quebec. 4 of the children saw the figure, but only 2. Manon Saint Jean and Lenrez, I guess that's what pronounced it, heard a voice which they described as soft and slow. It advised them to pray and promised to return again on Monday, October 7th. Others in the area reported seeing unusual things in the sky that evening. One boy in neighboring St. Ballis, is that how you pronounce it? Or Basel? It is Basel. St. Basel is supposed to have called out to his father, "Look, Daddy, there's a man walking in the sky." Among the many other correlations, you will note that the month of March has often played an important part in these events. I filmed a lot of crap in March too, and the trees this year in particular. And if I don't use my mouse, then it stops. But if I have to try to bend my back, because I'm getting terrible shoulder pains again. I got to figure out the ergonomics. Do I have to? Yeah, I need to get a higher table or something. God, this leaning forward doing this stuff is like killing my frickin' back, and my shoulders. Among the many other correlations, you will note that the month of March has often played an important part in these events. Just as March and April have always produced many of our principal UFO sightings, these religious manifestations are clearly a variation of the UFO manifestation, or vice versa. The same methods of communication are being employed in both phenomena, and the UFO entities bear a marked resemblance to the religious entities. Our awareness of these correlations presents us with a small dilemma. Are the religious miracles really a manifestation of some extraterrestrial intelligence, or are the UFOs really some manifestation of God? Of course. The methods of miracles. Early in January 1969, a 7-year-old girl named Maria de Carmen Ocampo was walking in the wooded area outside of Uruapan, I guess it's I don't know how to happen, Uruapan, Mexico, when it would be nice if they had pronunciation with the damn fucking words, but it ain't gonna happen. When she reportedly saw a female apparition materialize in front of the large cedar tree. Of course, a tree is associated with it. Of course, once again, a tree is associated. It identified itself as the Virgin of Guadalupe and asked that flowers and candles be placed at the foot of the tree. Oh, there we go again. Yeah, you gotta get... Jesus Christ. Just like what happens in Bigfoot researchers in these gifting areas. The same damn thing. It is the same damn thing. And you know what? They'll manifest, they'll make it look like it's an angel, they'll make it look like it's Bigfoot. I'm totally convinced of it. Now, I'm not saying there's not such thing as Bigfoot. I'm just saying they make it manifest look like a Bigfoot. And not even necessarily saying there's not such thing as an angel. I have no idea. I don't know. I do know after 55 years of this shit show, if anybody shows up and says to the angel, I'm going to say, well, what the fuck were you doing these past 55 years or the past thousands of years? Why have you and the rest of your buddies allowed us to suffer in such terrible misery here? I'm not going to respect you. And say, well, they can send you to hell, or they can make you die. Well, that's all they can do. Is that the best they can do? That's not something to be admired. That's something to say, you know what? You suck. I'm sorry, you suck as an entity, as a being. You suck. When you guys had actual power to really do something positive, change our minds, change the way things are, maybe design us in a way in which we didn't have like 5,000 genetic, issues. The human body is one of the most poorly designed things ever made. Unless you're talking about enslaving a group of entities and putting them in this meat suit so that we could produce loosh so they could feed upon it. Now that makes a hell of a lot more sense than anything else of these empty promises. I mean, I am so sorry, but I just don't. If some entity shows up and tells me they're an angel or a demon, I'm going to say, you know what? Regardless. And if it caused me to be dread and fear, I'm going to say, you know what? You're a piece of shit. You guys had a chance to do something right. Instead, you feasted upon our misery is what you did. And I'm supposed to respect you? And the worst you can do is send me to a worse place than here now? Well, that's great. Wonderful. Yeah, I mean, you're nothing more than just a slave catchers is what you guys are. I could go on and on about how my feelings about this was. Get back to this. After the apparitions vanished, the airplane mechanic named Mero Martinez came up with the frightening little girl. Came upon a frightened little girl on her way home. She was very nervous. He said she told him what had happened and what the vision had said to her. Frankly, I didn't believe her, and I went on my way. A few steps later, I heard a rare kind of music, very beautiful. I turned around and couldn't see anything. I learned later the girl was very sick for a day or two and couldn't talk. All of the miracles we have discussed here have centered around trees or bushes. And I keep telling you guys that you need to look at the trees and look up at the trees and the bushes when you're doing your research. It comes to Bigfoot research. Because there is a strong correlation with the trees and the underworld and these spirits, and how these trees somehow, the trees, the neurons of this world seem to connect all three realms, underworld, middle world, and upper world. And they use these trees as a highway. And they use the energy and the life force of these trees to help manifest. And it isn't just my opinion. I've witnessed it and seen it, and it seems to be quite clear that that's what's going on. It might be my opinion about how the process goes about, but the manifestations are happening near trees, for the most part. Water, trees, railroad lines, power lines. Now, I know there's times when people see it in the desert areas too, sure. But the vast majority of the reports are happening in those locations. I don't know. I mean, it's just like, and nobody, and I know I suck at what I do. My communication skills suck. My reading skills suck. My way of making videos suck. Yeah, that's still, I mean, somebody should hear what I'm fucking saying. There's only a handful of people in the whole damn world will hear what I have to say. Yet he's saying the same thing 50 years ago, and I bet you it went right over everyone's damn heads. It had to. We got Bigfoot researchers in 2023 that are still freaking just staring at the fucking ground for footprints. I mean, we have a new generations of people that didn't learn anything from the previous generations of this research. It's almost like it's part of this reincarnation soul trap matrix. It's like it's like there's no continuation, there's no continuity, there's no, build upon things to get to the next level. It's like they've created this, it takes us forever to figure out what the previous generation said. It's annoying. It's so fucking annoying. Well, we know what's annoying is my shoulder blades. Ooh, God, do they hurt when I do this. I don't know. It got to be ergonomics. Maybe I need to raise the mic up. I'll have to try this next recording. Somehow I got to raise that mic up about a foot. Allow my back to be straight, because this leaning forward shit is killing me. I'm too old for it. Anyways. Where did I go? We were talking about trees, and I had, All the miracles we have discussed have been centered around trees and bushes. A trifling but perhaps significant detail. All have involved children in isolated areas. Information on the Mexican incident is still, you know what? He figured this out too, and I didn't even know that. I didn't even know he figured this out until now. See, that's validation for me that I was on the right path when I've been telling people in the beginning of this year to start looking up into the trees. And nobody will listen to me. They'll listen to anybody else but a guy like me. It's like universal across the board. And you know what? They'll blame me for the bullshit that they won't do it, And I think it has something, there is something quote-unquote spiritual, psychological. I do think there's each and every one of us has spirits attached to us, and they fuck with us big time. I don't care if you're a Christian or not, whether you believe in Jesus or not, whether you believe in God or not. It happens across the board. In fact, it seems like the more you're religious and the more you believe in things like Jesus and God, the more fucked you get. You fucked you're with. Actually, they should write a song. You know that song, Love the One You're With? I'm sure they're dancing around saying, fuck the one you're with. Fuck the one you're with. All have involved children in isolated areas. Information on the Mexican incident is still scanty at this writing. But if the girl really did become sick and voiceless after her encounter, we have another interesting factor to consider. A New Jersey police officer Sergeant Benjamin Thompson was not only temporarily blinded by a UFO in 1966, but he said it took away my voice, and I was hoarse for 2 weeks after that. Contactees complain that they suffer from nausea, headaches, and general illness after their initial meetings with these entities. But after a series of such meetings, their bodies seem to adjust, and they are no longer adversely affected. Normal emotional reactions of nervousness and fear can account for some of these sudden ailments, but not all can be dismissed as mere psychosomatic responses. Some contactees' illnesses are suggestive of radiation poisoning, while others seem to be induced by odors which frequently surround the entities. Usually the entities connected with these miracles are reluctant to identify themselves. After several contacts, they offer vague labels for themselves, such can be interpreted in many ways. The lady at Lourdes finally told Bernadette, "I am the Immaculate Conception," a phrase that had no meaning to the young girl, but which greatly excited the theologist. The Lady of Fatima finally declared herself to be the Lady of the Rosary. But by the same token, the UFO entities seem to adopt names such as Xano, Greek for stranger, or the use variations on ancient Greek and Indian names from mythology. Long-haired Venetians and long-haired angels are unquestionably part of the same package, coming from the same source but utilizing different frame of references to approach human beings. It is also highly probable that they don't actually have individual identities, but are manifestations of a greater force which is able to manipulate the human mind. This mental, as also emotional manipulation, is the key to our mystery. Possession occurs in both good and evil forms. Possessions as part of an overall manifestation. Many quantities display classic symptoms of possession. Arthur Ford, the medium, was possessed on one level. Dr. Newberg, author of OSP, on another, contactees on still another. All are subjects of the same phenomena, a phenomena which is not bred in the reaches of outer space, but which has always existed with us here in our own immediate environment. The well-investigated miracles are proof that the human mind can be exposed to induced hallucinations, and that information can somehow be inserted into the mind of some unknown mechanism. In most contactee events, the precipitant is alone and with a small group when the UFO contact occurs. Such participants suffer medical effects which indicate that the contact was actually hallucinatory, just as the episodes involving children or religious entities have proven to be wholly or partially hallucinatory. The events or visions take place only in the mind and not in reality. The exterior manifestation, but this are merely part of the mechanism, a byproduct rather than a cause. It is likely that the outsider trespassing on the scene of a UFO contact would see the contactee standing at a rigid stance, just as the witnesses of miracles see only the children in a blind trance state. The contactees really experience, the real experience is in his or her mind as some powerful beam of electromagnetic energy is broadcasting to their mind, bypassing the biological sensory channels. That's very interesting. The remarkable non-event, and that makes sense why some people see stuff and others don't, right? The memorable non-event are therefore of little no importance. This process of broadcasting to the mind has always been known as possession or mystical illumination. The modern hippie, under the influence of LSD, often undergoes the same kind of experience and believes that he has tuned in to the cosmic consciousness. We have made the very human mistake of isolating all these manifestations into separate categories of stories. The demonologists, the angelologists, the theologists, the ufologists have all been examining the same phenomena from slightly different points of view. That's what I agree. That's very excellently stated. The eritologist, the study of ancient writing. Did I say that? Eritologist. So the eritologist is the study of ancient writings and describing man's contacts with supernatural and extraterrestrial or ultra-terrestrial beings. Spiritualists have been concerned with convincing manifestations Spiritualists have been concerned with convincing manifestations indicating that the human soul endures after death and populates some other planet or super reality beyond human perception. The phenomenologist has endeavored to study large parts of all this and link them together with abstract philosophical concepts. For the past 20 years, one group of UFO occultists have been whispering about the approaching New Age. Now astrologers and hippies are expecting an age of Aquarius, a new age when old values and concepts will be tossed aside as mankind somehow merges with the cosmic consciousness. Our awareness of the super cosmos leads us further along some predestined path. If the UFOs exist at all, they exist as a minor part of this great explosion. They are the blackboard upon which man's future is being written. To understand the message, we must first develop a pantology which can bring together all of these assorted beliefs and studies to form the whole. All of the assorted literature I have touched upon thus far merely serves as a beginning. We can't close our minds to some aspects of the fantastic while we happily embrace other equally fantastic parts. The ufologist sneers at the occultist and vice versa. The theologists and the religious frown upon both. Orthodox science laughs at the entire scene. Open communication with the phenomena is not something far in the future. It is here. It is happening now. Well, is that the case? Well, that's nice. I'd like to hear more about that one. Since he stated that 50 years ago, there should be some evidence of that. Well, that's the end of chapter 13. End of chapter 13. And that is a sure cure for alligator bites.